Oh. So this is my homemade, not really homemade, but this is my self-made waterproof camera bag. This is the YETI Panga 28 liter, and inside I threw in the Shimoda large mirrorless core unit. And when I first started landscape and nature photography, I focused on activities that were a little bit more involved with the water. You know, boating, going to the Nepali coast, you know, doing more stuff at the beach, more seascape photography. And at that time, I always thought it would be nice to have a waterproof, submersible camera bag. And as I got more into like landscape, wildlife, and astrophotography, the need for like an actual submersible camera bag kind of went away. So I kind of stopped thinking about it. That was until we took this trip over to Caddo Lake State Park here in Texas, where I knew I was going to be photographing primarily from the safety or unsafety of a kayak. So I wanted to get myself a submersible camera bag. I wanted the peace of mind knowing that in case I was the idiot that I know that I'm capable of being sometimes, that if I ended up flipping my kayak, that my camera gear wouldn't be ruined by not having a bag that wasn't submersible. So I ended up picking this guy up sort of last minute, like right before the trip came on, you know, throwing in the large camera core unit and, you know, heading up to Texas with this bag as my primary camera bag. If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that I primarily shoot with Shimoda camera bags. My main camera bag is the Shimoda Action X30, and I did think about bringing that camera bag and just sort of relying on myself not to flip the kayak over, but I don't trust myself that much. And because Shimoda bags are water resistant, but not totally waterproof and not submersible, I decided to not bring a Shimoda and risk my luck and chance it here on this trip. And you know, the second bag that I thought about bringing along was, you know, those traditional roll top dry bags. I do own one of those, but while they do work, the roll top design kind of makes it a little bit inconvenient to kind of access your camera gear when you're out, like, you know, in a kayak. You have to kind of undo the roll top, reach deep down inside the bag, pull the camera out, and it's just like not the most ideal situation to be in. I've used YETI products like the storage bins for a little while now, and I knew that they made submersible storage bins, so I figured I'd take a look at their setup, and I ended up picking up this one because not only do they promise that the bag is actually submersible, but access-wise, as you could tell earlier, it's much easier to access your camera gear from the comfort of a kayak. It has this open zipper design, so it makes accessing your camera gear just a little bit easier when you're sitting in a kayak in the middle of God knows where and you're all alone. It just made more sense than your traditional roll top dry bag. So a quick rundown of the build quality of these bags. This YETI bag features a very thick TPU material. It's almost like puncture proof. You know, it seems super durable, and it seems much thicker than your traditional dry bag, so you know it's protected against scratches and punctures more so than your traditional dry bag. I think this material is even thicker than what they use on the Shimoda bags. And the way that you access your gear is through this hydro lock zipper down here. And this zipper, while it's big, beefy, and I'm sure it seals off the water very well, it is a little bit of a hassle to open, especially when you're on a kayak in the middle of God knows nowhere. The weight of this bag is a little bit on the heftier side because of all like the heavy duty materials that they use to kind of, you know, build this bag. Coming in at just under 4 pounds, it's not the lightest backpack in the world. Again, the traditional dry bags with like less dense material is going to be lighter weight and more portable. And of course that weight is going to be even heavier when you start throwing in all of your heavy camera gear inside. There are lighter camera bags out there, but for me, I'm primarily going to be comparing this bag to like the Shimoda bags, and it's around the same weight, so I didn't mind that too much. Okay, so capacity wise, like the name suggests, it comes in at 28 liters, and I feel like anywhere from like the 20, 25, 30 liter range is probably the best to carry like your camera gear essentials. And I say essentials in quotation marks because there's a lot of gear that I brought that I didn't end up using on this trip. So, you know, everything that's essential that would make me feel like I was prepared to take any sort of shot. And we'll kind of do a quick rundown of the gear that we brought with us here. I'm actually filming on my main camera, the Sony Alpha 1, and I'm using the main lens that I was using for this entire trip, the Tamron 28-200. That was kind of like the main setup. We used it for pretty much all the shots that we took on this particular trip. But on this side of the bag, we've got the 100-400, we've got the DJI mic mini case, you got ND filters, of course, microfiber towel cloth, and then in this bottom section of the bag here, I'm gonna have to kind of bring the camera cube out a little bit here. In this bottom section of the camera cube, we've got the DJI Mini 4 Pro controller down there. We've got a wide angle lens 16-35 f4. We've got the teleconverters down there. And this is, again, the large mirrorless core unit from Shimoda. And it does actually sit in the bag a little bit short, like there is still a little bit of room. So to make sure that I didn't have the camera bag kind of shifting back and forth, I stuffed my think tank rain cover and my rain jacket on the bottom of the bag just to add a little bit of cushion and again kind of fill the space up so the camera cube wasn't kind of jostling on the inside of the camera bag itself. Since we have the bag open, we've also got kind of a minimalist quote unquote internal pocket that they've got here. Inside of here, I've just stuffed like some extra stuff like batteries, toilet paper. You always want to bring toilet paper as a part of your camera bag. You know, extra tools, cables, chapstick. You know, this Yeti bag also comes with zipper lubricant that you would want to use if you're going to be using this bag over and over again, stuff like that. And I kind of like that this bag has such a very minimalistic design, because when you're thinking about going out and bringing a bag that is submersible, you're probably going to a place like this where you don't really want to weigh yourself down with too much complicated stuff. So the maximalist in me, if this bag had extra compartments, would be trying to fill out all the compartments with a variety of different stuff. And you know, it's nice that they kept the design simple to kind of like simplify what you need to bring, you know, when you're actually utilizing the camera bag. Not the camera bag, but the backpack. The 28-liter size does fit underneath the airline seat as a personal item, but it just barely kind of fits underneath that airline seat. So for one of the flights that we took over here, I did end up throwing it into like the overhead compartment because I got on board a little bit early, so I kind of had access to that extra space. But you know, in a pinch it can work as a personal item. Just know you're not going to get as much legroom if you are going to be stuffing it under the seat in front of you. The durability and ruggedness have been fine so far. You know, I haven't done anything super crazy. I took it on a hike back home on Oahu, and I obviously took it here to travel to Cattle Lake, and I haven't had any issues. But thankfully I haven't had to test its like waterproofing, like actually, like I never actually flipped the kayak, so I never actually had to test the waterproofing, which is a good thing, but we'll be testing that here soon enough. I chose this black colorway, of course, because you know, I like everything in black. But you know, as you can see, it's a little bit of like a scuff and dust, and you just get stuff scuffed up easily that I've noticed. So you can see all along this side, you've got, you know, extra like scuff marks and all that kind of stuff. They do make a gray colorway that I think will kind of hide the scuffs a little bit better. But you know, I live and die by having everything in all black, and yeah, it does get a little bit dirty quite easily. Yeti also features some external carry loops. I've kind of just jerry-rigged my own kind of straps to this side of the bag on the front side. I wish that they added like extra areas and carrying loops to the side of the bag to maybe strap a tripod or a water bottle to the side of the bag, similar to how like Shimoda would. I don't think it would be too difficult to kind of add those to the bag, but you know, by just having like these straps on the back side of the bag, you're kind of limited. If you want to, you know, carry a tripod, this is kind of the only way to really do it. And you know, when I was paddling and not shooting, and you know, just kind of getting myself around with the kayak, I did, strap the tripod onto the bag like this. In the off chance, again, if I was foolish enough to flip the boat, at least I wouldn't have to go fishing and diving for the tripod that also fell. It'd be attached to the bag. So, something that I wish that they would have done is, again, add a little bit more external carry options in this bag. In terms of comfort, I've actually been genuinely impressed by this bag. Because I use Shimoda bags, I'm used to using the most comfortable camera bags on the market. And while this one is definitely no Shimoda bag, the carrying experience is actually surprisingly good. I took this on a hike right before we left to Texas. And that was the first hike that I did with it, and it surprisingly did quite well. If I put this camera bag on the correct way, kind of bring it up high and tight, bring the waist straps around here, you can see that it's actually kind of almost a sleek looking camera bag when I wear it, and it's actually not as uncomfortable as I thought it would. Now, there are some things that are a little bit uncomfortable. The shoulder straps are nice and thick. I don't really have any complaints about the shoulder straps, aside from the fact that they don't include any external carry options like the Shimoda bags do. So I added this Matador pouch. I can put my phone, passport, whatever inside the pouch. This is primarily like quality of life things. So you could do that if you wanted to. But aside from that, the padding feels pretty good. I didn't feel like the shoulder straps digging into my shoulders too much. Of course, we got the capture clip here on this other side. The sternum strap works fine. It's just your traditional, lock and clip shoulder strap. The only thing that I wish that it did have was, you can see you got this extra piece of fabric just kind of dangling in the wind. So I wish they added just a little strap keep, little elastic piece would actually help that a lot. Of course, you can always add your own, but just letting you know what this camera bag comes with and doesn't come with. And then if I can kind of take off my waist belt here, or my fanny pack, we'll talk about this guy in a minute. And we talk about the waist belt of the bag itself. It's a simple waist belt. It doesn't have anything super special to it. It's just two straps, but it gets the job done. It does well. But when you are wearing the bag kind of cinched down tight and close to your body, because this bag has such kind of sharp edges, you do feel it digging into your okole or your butt a little bit. So again, this won't be a problem if you're a taller person, if you're blessed with good genes, but I'm small, little 5'4" Asian man, so I definitely feel it. It's not painful or anything, because I do go to the gym and do some glute exercises every now and then, but just know that it's there if you are on the kind of shorter side and shorter stature. You can kind of get away with this by just not using the waist strap at all and just wearing the bag super high up and really cinching down the shoulder straps. Yeah, you can kind of get away with it, but then you don't have the support of having a waist strap, which I always prefer, especially if you're going to be taking this bag hiking. This is me just being wishful thinking. I don't mind when regular bags, use these kind of cheaper waist straps where it's literally just a piece of fabric. But personally for me, if I am thinking about using a bag as a camera bag, I'm gonna want more padding on the waist strap. So whether or not it's the big actual belt like how Shimoda does, or if it's something that's closer to like what Wandered does, where they actually have padding on these like kind of externally made camera straps or waist straps, that's something that I would like to have seen with this bag. Again, you can always add your own, but it's just something to think about if you are planning on using this particular bag as a camera backpack. The back panel here, there's really nothing special to it. It's just like this foam material. Has some padding, but it's not the most padding in the world. And because it's just like this kind of dry bag, dry foam type of material, it doesn't have a lot in terms of like breathability. What I would have liked to see is some aeration mesh or something like that on this side of the bag, as well as the shoulder straps as well. Kind of like how they have on the Explorer series line. I'm also not too big of a fan of the Action X's, kind of same sort of material for the back panel. You know, the aeration is just really, really poor when you use this sort of material, but you know, it's not too terrible. Again, this bag's purpose is just to get it to where the camera gear can be submerged in case of an emergency. I wasn't planning on using this as like a backpack too much. But if they did include those features, it would have been nice. All right, so overall, using this bag as a camera bag has been a fair experience. There are some quirks that I do miss about my Shimoda bags, and I'll kind of talk about that. The first being the zipper is extremely difficult to open, especially when you're on a kayak. It's not the easiest thing to do. You almost always have to use two hands to get the bag fully open. You have to use quite a bit of force to actually open up the bag itself. Again, that's an issue when you're on a kayak because you almost kind of want your movements to be very subtle, and you don't want to like be doing too much forceful movements because that's going to throw your balance off and then potentially lead to you capsizing, and it's just not a good experience when you're, you know, putting so much force into the movements and stuff. But again, it's a trade-off because this bag is submersible. When you're accessing your camera gear, you can see that the zipper also doesn't fully open up the entirety of the bag. You have access to your gear that I've placed up top here, but if you wanted to get the gear towards the bottom, you have to kind of dig for it a little bit. So, you know, it's not that great from that standpoint as well. I kind of wish that the bag fully opens up like how Shimoda bags do. You know, another thing too is that when you've got the zipper fully open, again, which isn't even a fully open because of the fact that it's not a fully open zipper, you know, you could have the camera bag out like this. You could be, you know, fiddling with your camera gear and stuff, and then all of a sudden you walk away, you go take your shots, and then spontaneously the camera bag is closed. So you have to like open up the camera bag, keep one hand on the pocket, and then be fiddling around with your camera gear on the inside, because otherwise the bag would just keep spontaneously closing itself on top of you. So as access for your camera gear, again, it's not necessarily like the best thing in the world, but it's not the worst thing in the world. You know, there are worse bags to use out there, like the roll top would be just a real hassle to access your gear relatively quickly. The other thing too, which is, you know, it's something that I don't quite understand when it comes to like bag manufacturers, but why, especially like outdoor bag manufacturers, like regular bags, fine. But outdoor bag manufacturers, why do you place the zipper and the side you're accessing your gear on the wrong side? And what do I mean by the wrong side? Well, if you're going to be accessing your bag, you're gonna usually in the fields bring the bag around, place it down on a surface kind of like this, and you should be able to access your camera gear or any gear that you have from the rear of the bag. That way, this side of the bag, the regular front side of the bag, stays dirty, and you don't have to be putting dirty stuff on your back when you put the bag back on. But Yeti made this mistake about putting the zipper on the front side of the bag. So, you know, if you are going to be accessing your camera gear in weird environments, the back side of your bag goes on the dirty dirt or whatever surface, sketchy surface you ever find yourself in, and then you can access your camera gear that way. And I think that's just backwards to me. I think, you know, it's more so backwards because I'm a photographer and I access the camera gear and I want to stay nice and clean, if at all possible. But I think even for other people accessing their fishing gear or their clothing and stuff, it's still a backwards design just because of the fact that it's kind of made for outdoor use. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Again, I'm comparing it to the Shimoda bags that have very thoughtfully thought this out and place the camera access on the rear side of the camera bag. So I'm spoiled normally in that sense, but you know, it is just something that I can complain about this bag. Again, it's a trade-off because this bag is submersible. And on that note, we will be testing the Submersion. I'm not gonna use my main camera bag as the Submersion test. I'm gonna use everything else that's on the inside of this camera bag as a Submersion test. But kind of as a precaution, You know, the most expensive thing that we have here is probably the 100 to 400 G Master. So here's what we'll do here. Put the filters. I guess we can put the whatever we have in this pocket here. Put that inside, wrap it up, seal it up nice and good like that. And then what we'll also do is we'll take the internal zipper and kind of seal off everything else inside of this bag here. The drone, the controller, not too concerned if that gets damaged. And we'll only place this bag inside the water for a little bit, and we'll kind of gently place it into the bag. I'm gonna use these accessory straps to kind of just dip it in, still have my hands on it, but just see if, even if this bag is fully loaded with camera gear and it's super, super heavy, does this thing still float? Because that's the question that I thankfully failed to answer because my canoe, my kayak hadn't capsized yet on this trip. So let's go down to the pier on the other side and test this out. Well, I apologize that this pole is in the way. I wanted to use this deck, but as you can tell, it's not the most stable thing in the world. So I'm gonna be using this, oh my God, that's slippery. This is another terrible idea. I'll be using this ladder here. Hopefully there are no gators hanging out underneath, but yeah, let's just get this thing in here, kind of hold on to it, and yeah, it floats. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's floating. Not bad. Let me see if I really dunk it in here. Yeah, it's floating, it's staying up, it's staying afloat. Even if I'm trying to like submerge it and dunk it. Yeah. Yep, submersible. Try to dunk the bag. Flip it over on this side. Maybe it'll start to sink. Nope. Pretty good. You know, as a submersible camera bag, it checks out. Ugh. All right, it's enough wet activities for the day. All right, so as you can see, passed the submersion test pretty well. And now I'm the idiot that has a whole camera bag that's super, super wet. And you know, we'll check the insides of the camera bag, see if anything has leaked through, and doesn't seem like it. Everything seems nice, perfectly dry. You know, disclaimer, if you are going to be doing any sort of like possible submersion, regardless of whether or not it's with this bag or another dry bag, the thing that you want to test out when you're on the land is what they like to call the air leak test. So you secure the bag and then you try and squeeze the bag for as much air out. And you can kind of hear it. I didn't fully close the hydrolock zipper, so you can hear some air escaping. That's when you know you're not sealed. But let's just kind of collect more air here. If you do have the bag sealed, ready for submersion, you should squeeze the bag and not have any air escape. If you hear any air escaping, then you know that you've got a leak somewhere and you gotta kind of diagnose that. But you know, hey, fully submersion worked well. I'm glad that even if it is weighed down with all this heavy camera gear, it still floats, which is a great thing. So it's good, peace of mind knowing that I made the right decision getting this bag, even though I didn't actually have to use it, fortunately enough. Now, as a disclaimer, I wouldn't go loading this thing up to the max with the heaviest camera gear that you can find and then dumping it into the river and having it sink to the bottom, because that's just dumb, you know. Just bring the essentials, make sure there's a little room for air, that way the camera bag can still remain at least somewhat buoyant. So don't, you know, don't be an idiot with this, use common sense. So I did mention that we were going to talk about this guy. This is the Yeti Sidekick 1 liter. Bought this up here in Texas actually, just to use as kind of like my waterproof fanny pack. And it kind of has the same benefits and drawbacks as the Panga, because what I was using before was this, you know, Aloha Collection little fanny pack here. It's 1.5 liters, so it can carry a little bit more, but again, it's not submersible. It attaches well to the Panga via these, accessory straps. It's really good in that sense. I just opted to kind of use one of these straps as like a little fanny pack waist belt here. But the same benefits that you kind of get the same sort of drawbacks, but because it uses a Velcro and magnetic opening system, you almost always have to like pry the bag open to get your essential items. So in here I've carried the, vlog camera, Osmo Pocket 3, keys, wallet, SSD, essential items. If I had to put other stuff and leave it at home or put it into that, internal mesh pocket on the inside of the Panga just to kind of free up some room to make access of this fanny pack really, really easy, or simple and easy. It's not easy, but simpler. But yeah, it's a nice addition if you are thinking about, if you're a fanny pack person or a side bag person, you want, quick access to like your essential items. This is like the perfect, kind of solution to pair well with this bag. They also make a 3 liter and a 6 liter. So if you have more gear, feel free to look into those. But yeah, not bad. It's not a bad companion to this bag. But who is this bag ultimately for? Well, it's going to be for those adventure people who do a lot of their adventures near big bodies of water where their gear is very, very at risk for submersion in case something like the worst possible thing happens. Now, if we're just talking about photographers, again, yeah, if you're a photographer and does activities where submersion of your camera gear is at great risk, I would definitely look into this bag as a great kind of setup to have for your water activities. But if you don't shoot a lot of stuff where gear is at risk of being submerged in the water, I think that's the real kind of question, right? Would I get this bag to use if I'm shooting from the coast or I shoot a lot of salt water? Probably not, because the quirks of this bag and kind of the trade-offs of this bag in terms of like the usability standpoint, the difficult to use zippers, the fact that the bag doesn't open up all the way, kind of make it a little bit of a hassle to use for a normal type of camera bag. But if you are going to be risking your camera gear in a situation where there's the possibility that it would get submerged, I definitely trust this bag and just deal with the trade-offs that you get with accessing your gear. Again, it's not the worst way to access your gear in terms of like a dry bag, especially when you compare it to like those more traditional roll top dry bags, but it is just not as good at accessing your camera gear as like your regular traditional camera bag. So yeah, you just have to ask yourself, are the trade-offs of how difficult it is to access this bag, do they justify the fact that your camera gear is going to be safe from any possible submersion? And in my case, for this particular trip, it definitely came in handy. It was definitely nice to just have that peace of mind in the back of my mind, even though I didn't actually have to use that feature. And if I'm gonna be doing any sort of activity where the camera gear is at risk of being submerged, then at least I have this bag now and I can use it for those select scenarios. So yeah, until somebody combines the elegantly thoughtful design of Shimoda bags with the submersible waterproofing that Yeti has done with this bag, then I think this bag for now is kind of the perfect solution for photographers when you pair it with any sort of internal camera cube like this one to access your camera gear and bring your camera gear in situations where there's the risk of possible camera bag submersion. I think you can't go wrong with this solution. But I think that's gonna about do it for me. I'm gonna chill for the rest of the day. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you'd like this type of content, this travel, vacation, a little bit of photography, edumacation, there's a boat coming. Hit that like button, comment below, subscribe if you aren't already. And you see you guys in the next one. Whoo, that's cold. It's cold on the back.